Hello and welcome. My talk today is about scandal and corruption. I'm Robert Williams. I give talks on cruise ships and other places, and scandal, corruption, crime and conspiracy are my fields of interest. Scandal and corruption are immensely popular. They sell newspapers, they attract public attention, they help bring down governments, they give people things to talk about in pubs and clubs and restaurants. But what is corruption? Corruption, broadly understood, is the misuse of public office for private benefit. It comes in many forms: bribery, fraud, embezzlement, extortion, straightforward theft, and nepotism, when you give preferment to people on the basis of family or personal connection. Corruption can be occasional, it can be systematic, it can infect a whole political system. So it's an important element in understanding how politics really works. Why does corruption occur in societies, and why is there more corruption in some societies than in other societies? Well, I would argue that corruption is really the consequence or the product of three factors: opportunities, incentives and risks. So if you have ample opportunities to be corrupt, if you have large incentives to be corrupt, and if there is no risk in being corrupt, then you're much more likely to be corrupt. Some people will say to you, "Oh, I would never take a bribe." Well, if they say that to you, you should ask, when were you last offered one, and how much was it? I think the reality is that most of us have never been tempted. Temptation is a wonderful thing. The most corrupt countries in the world tend to be those which have failed states, which have governments that don't work effectively, that are racked by civil war and poverty. So among the most corrupt countries in the world at present are Somalia, Afghanistan, Sudan, Myanmar, what we used to call Burma, Iraq, Chad, and any of the stands, the so-called stands in the former Soviet Union, Uzbekistan, for example. The least corrupt countries in the world tend to be Scandinavian countries: Denmark, Switzerland, Norway, Finland. Australasia, New Zealand is particularly free of corruption. The Netherlands is another country which has relatively low levels of corruption. In Western Europe, of course, the most corrupt country is probably Italy. I don't think anyone will be surprised by that. The UK is generally regarded as more corrupt than Germany, but less corrupt than France. You can make your own judgment about the accuracy of that. So what are scandals? Well, scandals are events which take place which provoke or elicit some public outrage or concern, some reaction from the public. And that reaction is driven by one thing, that is expectation. We have expectations of how people in certain roles should behave. And if they don't behave in that way, then that can cause a scandal, causes public attention and possibly disgrace. So, if, for example, we read about a rock star who is arrested for possessing cocaine, that would be a sort of minor scandal, but not much of one, because we really expect rock stars to do that kind of thing. If, on the other hand, we read a story which said that the Archbishop of Canterbury had been arrested in possession of cocaine, then that would be a huge scandal, because it's about the office that the person holds. Now, the important thing to remember is that to understand, also to recognise a scandal, I would say, there has to be public knowledge of it. The French writer Molière once wrote, "To sin in secret is not to sin at all." Scandals are public events, not private ones. They may involve conduct which carried on in private, but unless it's made public, it can't be a scandal. Scandals are seen generally as having two phases. They have what you might call the original misconduct, the affair, the relationship with Monica Lewinsky, the burglary of the Watergate building in the 1970s in Washington. And then a second phase in which the people involved in it, or the people responsible for the misconduct, attempt to conceal or to minimise the misconduct. And that's what we normally call the cover-up. Now, both scandal and corruption have become ever more prevalent in our society, and it's worth taking a few minutes to understand why. I think part of the reason comes from a general social trend where we have a decline in deference towards our betters, towards our rulers. We're more sceptical about them. That goes hand in hand with a sense of a decline of trust in government and its efficacy and its righteousness. But I think one of the main changes that's taken place is changes in the media. We now have media 24/7. We now have global media. Global media have to fill their pages, have to fill their websites, have to fill their news bulletins with stories. And they look more closely at politics and at politicians. Allied to that, we've got the development of new technologies such as the internet. There are no editorial controls anymore. Anyone can be a writer, anyone can express an opinion, anyone can attack a politician, anyone in particular can spread a rumour or make an allegation. And it's these rumours and allegations which are picked up and then exploited by more mainstream media. But politicians themselves have some responsibility for the increased importance of scandal and corruption. Politicians, particularly American politicians, realised some while ago that it was quite effective as a strategy to attack other politicians, to call their character into question. And of course this invites reciprocation. And so politicians attack each other on personal grounds, what they call in America going negative about your opponent. And then finally, the point I would make is that I think journalism has also changed. Journalists used to be much more respectful of government. They used to depend on handouts from government, informed sources close to the Prime Minister say, etc. But since Watergate, I think journalists have become more independent, more distant from politicians, and much more ready to attack them than they used to. So, if you like, we've had three sets of animals here, three kinds of dogs. The press used to be lapdogs of politicians, then they became watchdogs, and now they're attack dogs. And amongst their principal weapons are scandal and corruption. Thank you.